The duel was set. Lloyd would face off against Knight Newman in just 1 month. As the date drew near, Javier confronted Lloyd, confused. "Are you seriously confident you'll win?" Lloyd sat cross-legged on his bed, unbothered. "Confident? Of course not." He explained plainly. Newman was a junior sword expert, nicknamed the Heart of Mana. Lloyd, just a scrawny noble with a shovel. There was no competition. He knew he was outmatched. "Why else do you think I asked the Baron for a favor?" he said with a smirk. But then, the unexpected happened. Lloyd made a strange request. "Teach me swordsmanship." Javier, immediately annoyed, refused. "I'm supposed to protect you, not train you to be more dangerous." Lloyd pressed on. "All right, how about this? I help cure your insomnia in exchange." Javier froze. How did this guy know? Lloyd, having read the novel, already knew the cause: Swordmaster Syndrome, the result of overdeveloped nerves in high-level swordsmen. Even Javier didn't know that about himself. After a pause, Javier agreed, curious if this fool could really help. Later that night, Lloyd handed him the perfect cure, a textbook on reinforced concrete structures. Sure enough, Javier was knocked out cold, hugging a pillow, snoring peacefully. Lloyd grinned. Works every time. The next morning, a refreshed Javier stood tall and declared, 50 laps, now." Lloyd blinked. "Excuse me?" "Run." And so he did. Lloyd ran around the training ground, panting, drenched in sweat, but still moving. At lap after lap, he shouted at Javier, "Are you waiting for me to give up? Say I'm not cut out for this?" He knew Javier's type, the kind that silently judged and expected failure. But Lloyd was different. He wouldn't break. This wasn't half as hard as his life back in Korea. Days filled with hard labor, sleepless nights, starvation, and isolation. Compared to that pain, this was a walk in the park. Subnotification. Passive skill, ugliness, has increased to level 4. People who see you will feel an uncontrollable urge to punch you. Lloyd shouted at the sky, "Who even made this a skill?" Still, he ran under the moonlight with a determined grin. Javier, watching silently, was shaken. This arrogant fool was serious. And if Lloyd could endure all this, then maybe, just maybe, he was worthy of being taught. Sub Javier's opinion of you has increased by +1. Current opinion, -28. You gained 18 RP. Javier clenched his jaw, unsure if he was angry or impressed. Meanwhile, in the manor, Baron Arcus sat with Knight Newman. He couldn't believe his son challenged their loyal knight to a duel. Though worried, he still asked Newman to go easy on him. But Newman's smile hid something darker. Internally, he was plotting murder. If things went well, he'd kill Lloyd in the duel, make it look like an accident, and eliminate the Baroness too. Then, disappear from the village forever. A month passed. The entire estate gathered for the duel. Lloyd and Newman stood on opposite sides of the training ground. Lloyd, still wielding a shovel. The training ground was silent as tension hung in the air. The moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. Lloyd versus Newman, an official duel. Standing beside the arena, Javier noticed something odd. Lloyd's shovel, forged by a blacksmith, wasn't just a tool, it was a weapon, purposefully crafted. Across the field, Baron Arcus sighed and covered his face. "My son, an idiot," thinking this is some kind of joke. But Javier wasn't so sure. He thought back to the last month. Lloyd trained every morning without a single complaint. He worked with engineers on the estate's boiler room, and every evening he trained with a sword until he collapsed from exhaustion. This wasn't the behavior of someone joking around. Javier narrowed his eyes. Lloyd was serious. The Baron stepped forward and raised his hand. "I declare the duel between Lloyd Frontera and Knight Newman begins." Newman charged forward, sword drawn. Lloyd simply smirked and raised his shovel. Clang! The metal rang out. Lloyd blocked the first blow with ease. Everyone froze in shock. Newman attacked again, harder this time, but once more Lloyd deflected it. Javier's eyes widened. The technique. It wasn't random. It was efficient, practical, something used in real combat. How'd he learn this? Lloyd grinned to himself. Of course I can fight, he thought. In Korea, every man learns hand-to-hand combat. This is just a bayonet technique with a shovel. The brown-haired noble used the shovel like a riot shield. He jabbed the point like a spear. Then, to everyone's confusion, he planted it in the ground and jumped on it like a springboard. Javier looked on in disbelief. Wait, is he serious or just insane? Newman yelled and went for another strike, but Lloyd countered again and again, gradually pushing the knight back. First weapon, the shovel. Second, basic fencing I learned from Javier. Third, now this.
Skill activated. Tool synchronization. Digging level 1. Become one with the shovel. Body and soul. Synchronization increases effectiveness.
Lloyd's shovel began to glow. Javier's opinion of him increased. So did the Baron's. Even the Baroness, watching from the stands, was moved. Lloyd had earned 97 RP, enough for another skill, and he used it. Newman gritted his teeth and stepped back. This wasn't going according to plan. He decided to use everything. His body began to glow. He was activating his mana heart, a signature technique only high-level knights could wield. Javier tensed up, eyes narrowing. No untrained noble can stop that, he muttered. The knight lunged, blade glowing with energy. Lloyd stepped forward. The sword came crashing down, boom, directly onto the shovel. It didn't even dent. Newman's eyes widened in disbelief. He felt his strength slipping away. Lloyd smiled coldly. Fourth skill, mana mastery. He had absorbed the attack, and the knight's mana with it. Newman staggered back in shock. My mana, it's been drained? Crack! Lloyd swung the shovel, catching him square in the jaw. A tooth flew into the air, glinting in the sunlight. Another swing, to the chin. And one more, to the head. Wham! Knight Newman collapsed. The entire crowd stared in stunned silence. The Baron, speechless, slowly raised his hand. Lloyd Frontera wins. Newman lay defeated, blinking at the sky, still processing what just happened. Lloyd walked up casually, shovel over his shoulder. He looked down and smirked. You've been beaten. And then, whack! He swung the shovel again. And again. Time for your long-awaited punishment, he said coldly. Newman screamed and tried to crawl away. Arcus leapt up in shock. The duel is over! That's enough! Lloyd! His father roared. But Lloyd wasn't done. The idiot son of the estate had just crushed a knight and wasn't finished making his point. The duel was over, Newman was down, but Lloyd wasn't done. With his shovel still in hand, he raised it once more. The nearby knights panicked and rushed in to restrain him. Let me go! I'm calm now, Lloyd protested. They hesitated. He gently placed the shovel on the ground and sighed, only to pick it up again and resume hitting Newman with it. The knights held him back again. Standing nearby, Bayon frowned. He's lost it, he muttered. But Javier, watching carefully, noticed something strange. Lloyd was hitting Newman, but only just enough to make a scene. He wasn't trying to actually hurt him. Behind that angry expression was calculated restraint. Javier's thoughts wandered to 15 days before the duel. Lloyd had approached him asking to learn the Asahan mind technique, a forbidden and incomplete skill for mana absorption. The knight had been stunned. How do you even know about that? He asked. I talk in my sleep, Lloyd said with a sly smile. You told me yourself. In that moment, Javier imagined Lloyd wearing an iron mask, like some dark genius plotting in the shadows. Still, the knight denied him, saying the technique was too dangerous. If I complete it? Lloyd had asked. Maybe, Javier said reluctantly. And so Lloyd began working on it himself, visualizing how mana flowed, testing it with movements, aligning external mana without corrupting his mana heart. He theorized it like an engineer. This one is the auxiliary engine. That's the core. Javier had been unnerved. Lloyd wasn't just figuring this out. He knew things he shouldn't. Eventually, Lloyd had succeeded. The Asahan core pulsed in his chest, blue and bright. His control had grown so much he could now form up to 3 contours. With training, he could reach even 5. System notification. Javier's opinion of you has increased by +5. Back to the present, the knights struggled to keep Lloyd back. The Baron, Arcus, slammed the table in anger. Enough, Lloyd! You're disgracing the knight's name. Still catching his breath, Lloyd sneered. Then why don't you check under the tablecloth? The room froze. Arcus hesitated, then pulled up the cloth. Beneath it, a pile of sealed letters. The Baron's eyes widened in horror. Lloyd turned toward him calmly. These were hidden inside the estate's walls. Instructions on how to forge land deeds. A list of everything the Baron liked and disliked. And letters exposing how Knight Newman sold out the estate. Arcus opened one with trembling hands, his mouth hanging open. Newman, still groaning on the floor, stared in disbelief. How had Lloyd found those? Simple. Last night, Peidong the hamster had retrieved them. Arcus slumped into his chair, defeated. Lloyd stood tall, shovel in hand, and turned to the nobles. Do you want justice for this man? The room was silent. Then Lloyd grinned. We'll give him two choices. We tie a starving rat to his head and exile him. He's demoted to a soldier. Let him redeem himself, if he can. Gasps echoed. Even Bayan raised an eyebrow. A harsh warning, but a wise one, he whispered to Javier. The nobles nodded reluctantly. Even Newman, beaten and trembling, muttered, I have no objections. But inside, he was seething. You'll regret this, he thought. You'll all regret this. Lloyd, however, just smiled. He could read Newman's face. He already knew how this story ended. Then Lloyd pulled out a red sunflower seed. Newman's face turned pale. You want mercy? Lloyd asked, smiling coldly. He tossed the seed to Peidong. The little hamster gobbled it up, a spark, a glow. The crowd looked up. Peidong grew and kept growing. Jaws dropped as the oversized furball soared into the air like a meteor. Newman looked up and screamed. The giant hamster plummeted from the sky. Boom! Flattened him like a pancake. Dust settled. Silence fell. Lloyd stood with his back turned, hand on his belt, raising one finger. Problem solved. The nobles gawked. Newman twitched, and just like that, another problem inside the estate was taken care of. A vast mountain plain stretched across the horizon. In the middle of it all, Padong the hamster was flinging dirt everywhere, digging trenches through the entire city street like a furry bulldozer. Lloyd watched with a satisfied grin. Javier, confused, asked what his beast was doing. Widening the roads, Lloyd replied casually. Meanwhile, workers carrying materials stumbled over, tired and frustrated, until moments later something changed. They were suddenly pumped up, sweating with determination as they worked with newfound energy. White tiles soon lined the ground. A beautiful road began to form. Lloyd explained, in ancient times there was a city called Rome. They loved building roads, real roads. That's what we're doing. From the Baron's house to the eastern slope. Javier looked suspicious. Where did you learn all this? Not just the roads, he was referring to the boiler heating system, the advanced summoning and magic that felt far too polished for someone like Lloyd. Are you really the young master? He asked bluntly. System warning. Javier doubts your identity. Danger level rising. Lloyd's grin faded. Javier was smart. Too smart. He might figure out the truth, that someone else now inhabited the Baron's son's body. And if Javier Asahan found out, Lloyd was done. Still, Lloyd played it cool. He flexed his special skill, fast-talking plus persistence, and replied with something vague and innocent. But Javier wasn't buying it. He stared Lloyd down. Even elite mages take years to learn the spells you've suddenly mastered. How do you handle mana like that? You're not even 21. Lloyd froze. His mouth opened. He panicked. Maybe I'm a genius? He said weakly. Javier's face stayed cold. Flustered, Lloyd turned and stormed off, muttering, If you've got nothing else to say, I've got work to do. Later, at the work site, Lloyd passed Bon, one of the knights. Watch the construction. I've got something to handle. Bon saluted. Of course, sir. Just then, Javier reappeared. I'm coming with you. Lloyd rolled his eyes. You don't need to say the obvious. Of course you are. And off they went, toward a town deep within the Rinia estate. At a shady inn, a loud thud echoed as a furious man slammed the table. This was THS, a con-man swindler, now broke and desperate. Towering behind him stood his hired muscle, a bulky man in black with a scarred face and a permanent scowl. If you can't pay me, I'm out, said the enforcer. I'll pay, I swear, just give me time, THS begged. His assistant growled, warning that if payment didn't come, he'd vanish, permanently. But before any deal could be made, kick! The door exploded open. Lloyd entered. He glared at THS. Long time no see, THS paled. Lloyd Fra! Panicked, he grabbed his assistant. "Let's go!" They dived out the window, landing in the alley. But Javier was already waiting outside. He calmly blocked their path. "I won't chase you," he said, drawing his blade. "Just hand over the swindler and walk away." The enforcer sneered. "You think you can stop me?" A dark core formed in his hand. Black magic. Lloyd watched from the broken window, just like in the novel. Javier's first battle with the dark mage. The air trembled with energy. A wave of pressure from the mage's gravity spell pushed Javier to the ground, but Javier didn't fold. He grounded himself. The blue mana core in his chest pulsed. Triple ring mana heart engaged. With a roar, he cut through the barrier, shattering the gravity magic. The dark mage tried to retreat into the sky. Lloyd smirked. "Nope." Whoosh! The mage was blasted down. Meanwhile, THS stumbled into some barrels, trying to escape. Javier loomed over him, blade raised. "For cheating honest people, I'll cut your legs off. You'll crawl to court." Just as he swung, Lloyd jumped in. "Stop! You've lost it! You can't drag a man to court in that state." Javier halted, stunned. The knight blinked, confused. Why? Was Lloyd showing mercy? High in the mountains, overlooking the vast estate, Javier stood watch as THS, the swindler, sat tied to a chair, visibly nervous. Across from him, Lloyd lounged with folded arms, an unreadable expression on his face. With a calm smile, Lloyd reassured THS. No need to be scared, but his next words sent chills down the conman's spine. When people face death, they get greedy. They'll do anything if given the chance. He leaned in, smiling. Beheading you would be too merciful. THS blinked. So, I'm forgiven? Lloyd's grin sharpened. Oh, you'll take your secrets to the grave. Eventually. He then casually slid a piece of paper and pen across the table. Sign this, and we'll call it even. THS glanced down. A labor contract, a legit one. He'd even be paid, but with a catch. 80% of his wages would be taken to repay his debts. At that rate, he'd be free in 520 years. The swindler's jaw dropped in horror. Javier, standing beside them, sighed. Of course Lloyd didn't come here to forgive. He came to own. As Lloyd continued to smile smugly, he remarked, Only an idiot kills someone who owes him money. Then, mockingly, he pulled out a suction tube and pressed it to THS's head. I'll squeeze every last drop out of you. THS, now in panic, asked why he'd even offer such a slave contract. Lloyd, feigning innocence, told him it was his only option or they'd handle this in court. Tears in his eyes, THS signed the contract. Above them, white clouds drifted peacefully through the blue sky. A few days later, in a cart rolling through a forest path, Lloyd, Javier, and THS sat as the wheels clattered beneath them. We got a bit of money out of him, Javier noted, holding his sword. Enough to cover interest for a few months, but Lloyd had other plans. That's all going into construction. We need way more than 30 workers. Back at the estate, a massive help wanted sign had been posted. 20 gold a month, apply at the Baron's estate. A huge crowd formed. Javier stood beside Baron Arcus, who was unsure whether to trust Lloyd. But Javier calmly stated that Lloyd had delivered heating at a low cost, exposed a traitor, and upheld justice. That was enough. Soon, villagers stepped forward to apply. One man with a red scarf and a small child bowed gratefully. My son gets sick easily in the cold, he said, but thanks to your heating system, we're safe this year. Lloyd, taken aback, smiled awkwardly. Though he'd started all this out of greed, something about their gratitude felt good. Another villager mentioned having relatives in Racona who were now interested in installing Lloyd's system too. Lloyd's eyes sparkled. This is the beginning of something big. Back on the mountain, Lloyd and Javier stood at the edge of a cleared area. This system, Lloyd said, needs fuel. Soon, there'll be nothing left but tree stumps. Javier frowned. Then why keep building? To mine coal, Lloyd said smugly. He pointed to a trench that snaked up the mountain, dug for a new road. We'll dig it up, sell the coal at a high price, and make people dependent on our system. Javier raised an eyebrow. That's ruthless. Even the villagers get only a small discount? Lloyd didn't flinch. If we don't do this, we'll never pay off the estate's debt. Javier accepted the logic, but warned that the Baron had no idea about the coal. When he found out, there would be consequences. But Lloyd smirked. He'd read about failed mining attempts in the past, fragile roads, collapsed tunnels, but he had knowledge from the modern world. We'll use the shield tunneling method, a modern excavation technique. He imagined massive drill rigs, digging steadily and safely through the mountain. This time, he declared, we'll succeed. As they approached the old abandoned tunnel entrance, rubble littered the ground. Suddenly, movement. From the shadows of the cave, a red antenna twitched, then dozens, hundreds. Blood-red eyes glowed in the dark. Giant ants. The nest had awakened. Under moonlit sky, Lloyd stood on a rocky path near the collapsed cave. With a dramatic clap of his hands, he summoned a magical green ring, glowing with a star symbol. He spun it midair, chanting incantations, then raised it high above his head. A green beam of light shot into the sky, transforming into a shining star. Moments later, a fully furnished house descended in the same light, his reward for the spell. Lloyd, exhausted, sat at his table, pouring streams of green light from his fingertips into blueprints. He was finalizing a mid-level underground outlet design, grumbling about how long it took. "Can I summon 100 immortal workers who don't need to be paid?" he muttered jokingly. But thanks to the recent Newman incident, Lloyd had gained 639 reputation points, enough to unlock new mid-level skills. Now on site at the dig site, he used his new ability, Underground Scanning Dimension, casting green light through the rocky walls. The scan revealed a hidden room about 5 meters deep. Still, the task of drilling through was immense. His trusted hamster, Padong, had fallen ill from overwork. It was dangerous to use him again. Faced with no better choice, Lloyd activated the random mystical creature summon window. A green portal opened, and out slithered a pink snake girl with a bow on her head. Lloyd blinked. "Please at least tell me you have poison." She smiled sweetly. Turns out, she wasn't deadly. Yet. But, like Padong, she could grow stronger after eating sunflower seeds and had unique digging skills. Weeks passed. Now dubbed Belle, the snake was enormous, digging through tunnels while encased in a makeshift wooden barrel drill shield. She devoured the earth, clearing the way with her digging skill, level 1. Inside the cave, Javier, sweaty and bare-chested, stood ready with his blade. Belle blasted molten dirt and metal debris from her barrel, which Javier sliced away mid-air. Behind them, blacksmiths worked hard to forge tunnel supports. Javier sighed, exhausted, wondering how a knight like him ended up fighting alongside a snake inside a tunnel. Meanwhile, Lloyd, wrapped in a towel and covered in dirt, rallied the workers. They shoved the barrel deeper into the cave, and Lloyd wiped sweat from his brow, realizing that, without the oxygen pipes, they'd have passed out long ago. Javier told him they needed rest, but Lloyd shook his head. "I'm in charge. I'll stay." He thought bitterly about the lazy bosses back in Korea, who never even visited worksites, and swore he wouldn't be one of them. Using his underground scan again, Lloyd spotted a vein of coal behind the rock wall. A grin spread across his face. "We're almost there." Then he gave the order. "As soon as we reach the seam, dismantle the shield. Start expanding the chamber, but carefully." As he inspected the wall, a strange sound caught his attention. He squinted into the cracks. Suddenly, crack! A monstrous, bloodthirsty ant burst from the wall. Lloyd fell to the ground as the beast lunged. Javier sprang to action, blade flashing. But Lloyd wasn't staying down. He charged in with his shovel, swinging with all his might, and smashed the ant's head flat in one brutal blow. Breathing heavily, he stared at the corpse. This wasn't in the novel. Then they saw it. More eyes, more cracks, more ants, dozens, hundreds, crawling out from the tunnel. Lloyd shouted for the workers to retreat immediately. He and Javier stood alone, blocking the path. Lloyd, growling, tried to assess the danger. If the ants escaped into the estate, everything would be destroyed. There was no time for explosives, and the cave structure was unstable. Javier slapped Lloyd across the face. "Snap out of it!" "I'm not panicking," Lloyd barked. "I'm thinking." "But we can't hold them off forever," Javier replied, blade ready, but breath ragged. The two stared at the approaching swarm. In Lloyd's mind, a black void appeared, one single light bulb flickering to life. Ideas sparked. Then he grabbed a torch, yanked it from the wall, and shouted, "Forward! We attack!" Javier's eyes widened. "You're insane!" But he grinned anyway. Javier charged forward, slashing ants to pieces, while Lloyd followed close behind, torch in one hand, shovel in the other, a mad glint in his eye. Blood, dirt, fire, steel. They plunged into the swarm, and the tunnel roared.